Quick hits. This is something we added to the show, I think now about a couple of months ago. And this is where I talk about three things that I've been seeing a lot in the news today. I know a lot of you watching probably are as well. First one, Boeing. We've heard how, difficult a time Boeing has been having, whether it's the construction of their planes, whether it's the issues that they've had with their planes while flying, and recently strikes. Boeing machinists are on strike. And without them, they can't build planes. So Boeing is losing money every day. And we'll talk about that. Oil prices dropping. We touched on that earlier in the show. Why did oil prices drop? And third, activist investor getting involved with Pfizer. What is an activist investor? We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about why they've chosen Pfizer and perhaps what the stock is doing because of it. So let's move to the first one, which is Boeing. I think while I talk about Boeing, we can show a chart on just how much Boeing has borrowed in the last, well, let's call it little while. You can see that spike up. Well, Boeing, one of the largest companies in the United States, employs probably, if not the most people in the United States, but one of the biggest companies employing U.S. Citizens, individuals in the U.S. And unfortunately, they have pretty much grinded to a halt in many ways. And obviously, they've now laid off, furloughed, as we call it in some cases, laid off a number of workers. They aren't building planes because they can't. Their people are on strike and really causing a lot of damage for now. I think the strike is into its second month. And you can see how much Boeing is or has recently borrowed to keep things afloat, to keep things going, to meet their debt requirements and their debt obligations. So something to keep an eye on is Boeing's situation. I know a lot of investors own Boeing shares. And, the good news is Boeing still remains one of only two plane makers in the world, Airbus and them. And once they can figure out the strike situation, I'm hopeful we will see a big spike up, instant spike up in the share price. And they can get back to what they do best, which is building planes and building more planes than they were even before. So something to consider, and something I've been watching in the news has been Boeing. Oil prices drop. We talked about it. We have, a chart on oil prices, a shorter term chart, which shows the price of oil fall significantly. And that is just based on the fact that if Israel does not attack Iran, their oil refineries, their energy facilities, then Iran can keep pumping oil. They pump a lot of oil. There's also talk that the Saudis and other OPEC nations will start to increase their oil production. We know that the U.S. pumps over 13 million barrels a day. If former President Trump were to be reelected, there's talk that he would pump even more than that. So the price of oil could easily fall to $60. Some have said $50 a barrel, WTI. I'm not sure. Obviously, the price of oil is being inflated from time to time because of geopolitical events like what's happening in the Middle East. So take away those events, and yes, the price of oil probably goes down by at least maybe 10%. I think is definitely something that can happen. So oil falling is definitely something that many of us are going to pay attention to. Obviously, it affects us at the pumps when we go to fill up our cars. Our third quick hit and last one is activist investors are getting involved with Pfizer stock. So what's an activist investor? An activist investor is a business, a person, usually part of a business, that gets involved. They buy a lot of shares of a company, in this case, Pfizer. And they buy enough shares where they can then demand a seat on the board. And if they get one or maybe two seats on the board or however many seats, they can hopefully affect change at the company. So these activist investors, their idea is they want to see change. They believe the company should be doing better than it is, and they want to see change. And usually when an activist investor gets involved, you see the stock rise. And we saw the stock rise of Pfizer. And since then, actually, in the last week or so, that activist investor called Starboard, that's the business, they actually said that they've sort of softened their stance and that Pfizer board is doing a good job. And they met with the CEO and they like what they see and they don't think Pfizer is going down the wrong path. So because everybody was hoping that Starboard would affect change for the better, for the share price, now investors are thinking, well, doesn't sound like it because Starboard seems to be okay with what Pfizer's doing. So we've seen the shares of Pfizer fall. And we have a graph of Pfizer here, a chart of Pfizer. And you can see on the far right-hand side, it blipped up and came down as well. But I still think, regardless of activist investors, Pfizer's a very good company. They've gone into the oncology area, which is huge for them. They have great cash flow. They've taken up their earnings for the coming quarters. So they've raised their guidance for how much money they're going to make. They also pay just under a 6% dividend. So a very good quality investment to own. So regardless of whether the activist investor continues to be involved or try to get more involved with the name, I think a name like Pfizer can be and should be a name that individual investors look at for a nice diversified portfolio.